have read 0 books so far this year, and it is the 13th of January, so I'm going to do my best to rectify that in this video. I have several arcs on my Kindle, a couple of which are coming out in January, so I feel like I should get them read, and then I have some February ones as well, so if I get through the January ones, we will move on to February. So the ones that I have for January, Rabbit Hole, which is kind of a thriller. I'm hoping a kind of literary thriller. And that's coming out on the 18th of January, so very soon when I'm filming this, probably already, when you're watching this. And then the other one is The City of Stardust, which is a fantasy. So both of these are outside of my comfort zone. City of Stardust is by Georgia Summers, Rabbit Hole is by Kate something. And so yeah, both of these are genre fiction and hopefully plotty. I'm hoping that they will get me into reading because I really have been struggling with it so far this year, and I'm struggling with the light in this room. I'm not this red in person. Anyway, so I have a couple of books to read, but also today I am going into town, into London. I'm going to have lunch with my friend today, and then tomorrow I'm having brunch with a bunch of my friends. And as there are currently no trains from my town into London, my partner is coming with me to lunch today. He's going to drive me in, drop me off, and then drive home, and then I'm going to go stay at my mum's in South London, and then tomorrow it will be a 2.5 hour rail replacement bus journey home, so that is fun, because I have to go to the wrong place to get to the right place. So I'm sure I will have lots of time for reading. I actually haven't been reading because I've got really into knitting so far this year. So I've been making this jumper, which don't look at it too closely because it is my first attempt at knitting with circular needles. So it is not the neatest, but it's my first pancake basically, because then I have another one that I want to knit later, which is for an event. So I'm getting used to knitting with circular needles with this one, and then I will be more careful with that one. And then also right now I am crocheting rather than knitting a hat for my partner. You can see that is kind of hat-shaped. And he asked for brown. I would not have chosen brown myself, but that's what he wanted, so that is what he's getting. That's the reason I've not been reading, because although of course you can listen to audiobooks whilst you knit/crochet, it's really eating into my physical and ebook reading time. And so yeah, I haven't got through anything yet. But I am also going to try and finish this weekend because it is going to be below freezing most of next week. So he needs a hat, so I'm going to make him one. I swear it's a different day, it's just not gone above freezing for a while, and this is my warmest jumper, and this is my living room, so I don't have much else to show you. I have read about 40% of The City of Starlight, which was the first book that's coming out in January. I wanted to talk to you about in this video. I'm sure I will have given you an introduction with when it came or is coming out, etc. But it is a fantasy novel that is, I would say, new adult fantasy, I guess. There's a lot of swearing, more than you would expect in YA, but apart from that, it doesn't feel that far from YA. And it's about a woman, or a girl, who is called Violet Everly, and her brothers have been keeping a secret from her, but there is this curse that from every generation, one of the Everlys will walk into the darkness with death at their side. And she is growing up in this house and she's never let outside. And at the same time, we meet this boy, Alexander, who was kidnapped as a small child, and he is in this city called Fidelis, where they make stuff out of this thing called Reverite that's kind of magical, but it's not magic because it's just a different world where some other things, different things are possible. And his boss, he is the assistant to this woman called Penelope, and she wants to take Viola. We're not really sure why, or is it Violet? I think it might be Violet. She wants to take Violet and do something terrible with her. And this woman is very beautiful, incredibly old, and very creepy and dangerous. So that's basically the premise of the book. And I wish I could turn my brain off and just read and just be like, I accept what is going on, and I'm going to keep going with it. But it is really, it's fine, and readable. The writing is occasionally a little melodramatic, a little... There's this thing of description that feels like you can see the writer working, and that's what I really dislike in fiction, when it feels like the writer will have said, ah, yeah, that was a great line. Like, I really don't want to notice that, the feeling of smugness, I guess, about writing. And there is this repetition of the feeling that this happened, that this happened, that this, like, that's supposed to feel like good writing, and it just feels generic, like really obvious. Lots of people write that way, and it's not particularly interesting. Mostly, Violet imagines her in the blank spaces between paragraphs or the invisible inhale before a sentence, whereas her father is in an entirely missing book, one that her mother holds the key to, if she holds anything at all. Like, it's very cheesy, and I don't really like that writing. But apart from that, I was also reading this on the bus on the way to work, and all I was thinking was, do these characters actually have personalities or characteristics at all, or are they just there to serve the plot? Are they just doing things that are serving the plot? And also, why is our main character so stupid? Like, I get that she has never been allowed outside her house, she's very unworldly, she never got told anything about this world, but she's always like, oh, I don't know if I can trust this guy, but I'm going to tell him absolutely everything that's happened and my plans for the future and everything I know already, rather than be cagey or try and be clever. She's like, I'm being clever, I'm being so clever, I'm going to tell him absolutely everything. It's going, but I'm not sure it's going well. And I know I said this year I would DNF more, but can I DNF the first book I read in the year? Like, can my slump be so bad that it is the 19th of January, I have finished no books, and I DNF the first book of the year? I have now finished my first book of the year, and it was a complete dud. So I have two things to talk to you about. I'm going to review the book and also kind of talk to you about why I finished it, because this year one of my unofficial goals is to DNF more. I think that was probably one of my unofficial goals last year as well, and it's not something I'm particularly good at. So we're going to talk about my feelings about why I didn't DNF this book, even though I knew I didn't like it from about a third of the way in. This book is both overwritten and underwritten at the same time. Fairly cheesy and fairly common, like they didn't feel like particularly new or inspired lines. They probably felt like lines the writer had read before and liked, and that's why they thought they were great. And so for the whole time I was reading it, I was completely aware of the writer, and not in an interesting, like, meta way that was like bringing your attention to the construction, because it is a little about storytelling and fairy tales, so it could have been done in an interesting way, but it wasn't. It is not a book that trusts the reader. It is a book that feels like if it doesn't hammer everything home, you won't understand the story. The other thing is that every single important plot point happens off the page, and so that is really boring to read. Like, there are moments of incredible violence, they happen off the page. So our main character ends up going sort of around the world for a year on this kind of quest, this kind of adventure, and it says, near the end, Violet had bartered with scholars, infiltrated their parties, and unpicked their lies. And yet, we barely see any of this in the actual book. We see her going to parties, but we don't see how she infiltrated them. We don't see any wit or cleverness from her. She just gets given stuff, turns up to places, acts like an idiot. Like, there is none of this infiltrating parties and unpicking their lies like she's some sort of cool, clever spy. She comes across as just an idiot, and also not really human. And then of course there was the ending, and I'm not going to spoil what actually happened, but I would say that for a book that talks a lot about sacrifice, and the fact that, like, in fairy tales a lot of the time our main character has to sacrifice something. Like, if you make a deal with the fairies, you have to give something up. This is not a fairy book, but that idea of sacrifice and of deal making and things is really important in it. By the end, our main character has sacrificed absolutely nothing and is not asked to make any sacrifices or give anything up. There is no stakes really in this book. It pretends there are stakes, but nothing actually feels like there are stakes. Like, people die, but no one that is given any prominence in the story. People who turn up a couple of times. And so it doesn't feel that dramatic or that serious. And so it's not a particularly good book, basically. So why did I finish it? Why did I finish it when I knew all of these things, apart from the bit about the ending, going in, or from a third of the way through? Well, for one thing, it was the first book of the year, and I wanted to finish something, because it is the 21st of January today, and that's the first book that I've finished, and so I'm feeling like a bit behind with reading, and I didn't want to give up on something I had put so much time in, like the sunk cost fallacy, obviously, but At the same time, if I had given up on the book, then I would have lost out on something that I had read. On top of that, there is the fact that this is a Netgalley arc that I have, and I feel like I can't give a book a proper full review unless I have read the whole thing. Like, I couldn't have said that the ending of this was pointless and stupid and didn't make sense if I hadn't read the whole thing. I don't mind plotless books, I don't mind books that don't explain what's going on, but this book feels like it wants to explain and it doesn't know what's going on, and it just hasn't quite fully fleshed it out. Like, the characters aren't fleshed out, the plot and the reasoning and the like way that the world works, like the reasoning, our main character's motivations and this deal that has caused this curse, none of it is fully fleshed out or fully explained. And that is one of the other weaknesses of this book. But yeah, I'm so bad at DNFing and so bad at, particularly when I'm vlogging and I'm reading a book to talk to you about it. It makes the vlog worse if I DNF a book, if I can't give you full-throated thoughts, because you might want to know everything I thought about it. And I know I can tell you why I DNF'd it, but for some reason, I feel like I need to finish it. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts about DNFing in the comments, because I know intellectually that it's fine, but I always can't see it. There's always reasons not to, and always like more motivation to finish it, well, more shame about not finishing it, to be perfectly honest. This book took me ages to read. I haven't read anything else as well because I wasn't interested in reading it, and yet I couldn't get myself to stop and to DNF it. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'm going to read Rabbit Hole now. That's a thriller. Hopefully it will be much more fast-paced and page-turny, and will do a better job. And I'm also actually right now going to start my live show for Babel with Dolls. So that is the Big Book Book Club. We read Babel. If you are interested in seeing our thoughts about it, I will leave the live show linked in the cards above. We have a lot to say, I think. So I think it will be a great discussion. Today we are off to the seaside to see some friends. We are going to Southend in Essex. Just started the Rabbit Hole, and it is kind of what I was looking for in this video. So it is about a woman in her 20s who works as a teacher in a private school in Maine, and her father has recently, at the very beginning of the novel, died by suicide, and she lives with her mother and their dog. And 10 years previous to this, her sister went missing, and after her father's suicide in the first, like, I'm 20% of the way through the book and this has already happened, so none of this is spoilers, she discovers after her father's death that he has been still looking for her. She kind of knew because he was the only one who would not admit that his daughter was probably dead. And her father also was an addict, and there is difficult family relationships and kind of things under the surface. It's not particularly thrilling. I think it said it was described as a thriller, but so far it hasn't felt particularly thrilling. It is very much more like family drama and slow paced and more like character focused. But it might get more thrilling as we go on, we will see. But what it is doing is being quickly readable. I got through the 20% so far today very speedily, yet the writing is not annoying me, which if you've been here before, you will know I have a very, I'm very easily annoyed by writing, and this writing, while it is not like my favourite style of writing or particularly noticeable, like I'm not particularly paying any attention to the way that it is written, it is conveying what it needs to convey without irritating me in any way, which is a feat in and of itself. So far I think it might be what I need for this vlog, where I'm trying to read books that are more page-turny, books that are more like just fun and easy to read and don't require me to spend so much time doing it, which obviously didn't work out with City of Stardust because I spent so long on it because I didn't like it. So I am glad to be moving on into something different. And hopefully I will finish this one fairly quickly and be able to talk to you about it. I meant to film this in daylight, but I got home from work and I have just a horrendous migraine, so you're getting me in my pyjamas, ready for bed. I'm halfway through Rabbit Hole, and I don't know what's wrong with me. These are my favourite sweets, by the way. These candy kittens, gourmet sour shocks. They have to be the gourmet sour shocks because there's something about the chew. I am still enjoying it more than Stardust, but I don't know what's wrong with me that I can't like enjoy a book at the moment. I'm really struggling to find a book that I enjoy. So I don't read thrillers a lot, so I don't know how like action-packed they are generally, how much mystery is involved in it. This one, we are definitely slowly unsolving. Like there is this feeling of mystery and this feeling of solving something, but it is much more wrapped up in ideas of like grief and how people process grief, because our main character lost her sister 10 years ago and her father just died by suicide. So she's obviously like trying to deal with this grief and trying to process grief, and her mum is not particularly good at dealing with it. And it's also looking at like family secrets, addiction, and a history of like an unstable family. And so we kind of, our main character feels like she's becoming more obsessed with this case and with what happened, and we're finding out what's going on online with the people following this case. And she also feels like she's not particularly stable. Having a relationship with this guy who knew them, who was hanging around when she was young, and he seems kind of sketchy, but we're not really sure if he is sketchy. And there's a young girl who's interested in the case as well, who reminds her of her sister, who again might be sketchy, turning up at random times, but also, you know, wasn't old enough to have been involved in the case 10 years ago. She would have been 9 years old, so kind of trust her more. Anyway, it's just moving a lot slower than I thought it would be, and I am starting to find it a little bit repetitive in terms of the story that it's telling. And also, like, our main character is very unlikable, but it's kind of understandable because of her like moving through so much grief and depression and like a lack of ability to relate to the world. So it is understandable why she is so unlikable, and like it's fine for me to not like a character. I want it to go somewhere, and I feel like it's trying to talk a little bit about like sexism online and gender and things. It's still very white. It's a very white book, and I thought maybe it would comment a bit more on the true crime phenomenon. It's like kind of talking about people becoming obsessed with a case and the cases that they become obsessed with versus those that they don't, and the ways that people turn this into their whole life. Only very tangentially touching on that so far, and some of the like touching on gender in it feels a little unnuanced, but it's fine. It's still very readable, and like it's very short. It's like 4.5 hours according to my Kindle, the whole book, so I'm sure it won't be too difficult to finish. I've also started Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lenon. Ferdia Lenon is an Irish writer, and I did not realise this. So this is set in Syracuse in like the 5th century BC, after the Syracuse, or during the Syracuse-Athens War, and there's a load of Athenians captured and being held in a quarry. Our main character is a Syracusan, and his best friend, and they go to the Athenian quarry to try and get the Athenians to speak poetry to them, particularly obsessed with Euripides and the story of Medea. Medea was my favourite classical Greek play when I was studying all of the classical Greek plays. I read all of the tragedies, not all of the comedies, when I was at university. So far, I'm actually quite into this one. It has already been released by the time this comes out, so I'm actually able to listen to the audiobook, which I'm gonna do a bit of both, I think. But I've been having so much trouble reading right now. An audiobook is definitely helpful. But he is an Irish writer, and so it's interesting because it's written like in slight Hiberno English. There are elements of it that feel very Irish, like a lot of starting sentences with sure, and yeah, various other phraseology that is very Irish, which of course they would have been speaking, I don't know, but I don't know what they would have spoken in Syracuse. Was it Greek? I'm not sure. It doesn't matter what kind of English they speak, but I always enjoy it when it's not like standard, because it kind of plays with that idea of what the past should have sounded like. That comes from a very like classist idea of the classics. Anyway, so I'm enjoying it. It's also written in quite a poetic style, which so far I am enjoying it. It's quite fun, quite cheeky, but it feels like there's a lot of darkness underneath it. Our main character is kind of ignoring that, but there's some quite grim descriptions as well. So far I think it's my favourite of the three, but I'm only like 10% of the way.
Been feeling far away, 2 years in a couple of days. I just wave my hand to the world outside like it's all okay. I can't believe what my eyes have seen. I just woke up from a broken dream. Who can stop my hands from shaking? I need you to take them, and I don't wanna wait all night. I'm coming alive and my senses are a little demented. Can this be right?
Hello, I am halfway through Glorious Exploits now, and I am still enjoying it, although not quite as much as I was to begin with, as always. I'm really enjoying the way it's written. I really like it. There's like beautiful description, and it's quite fun and fast-paced, and I am liking the Irishness of it, which is like interesting because of the bit setting being Syracuse, which I think I talked about earlier when I talked about it, about like using a different English, modern English, non-standard English, to portray the ancient world, which I do think is, yeah, a really interesting, as I say, way to do it. But there are some. Our main character is a fool and a bit of a mess and an uncomfortable character to be in the head of, and I like that. But I do feel that sometimes it's a little simplistic. There's clearly some darkness in his past that's not quite being explored. It's kind of being left at the edges for us to question or to get at. But a type of like a lad who is sort of very proud and very touchy and very unsure of himself, and kind of all about appearance and ego, which is obviously recognisable. And I think that this book is a lot about masculinity, and it's about war, and the punishment of people after war, and how that relates to the idea of ego and masculinity, which I think is interesting, particularly because they're setting up doing this play Medea and also the Trojan Women, which are both obviously plays about women in Greek mythology, but in ancient Greece only men were actors, very much like Shakespeare. So you have the gender presentation of that, and a lot of these, there is all of the Athenians who are in it are men who have been captured from war and are being starved, and there is talk about like what it is to be a fatherless son, and to be a son with to be a son without a father and a father without a son. Our main character's best friend, Lenon, who is the one who is obsessed with putting on this play, lost his son. And so there is a lot of ideas about masculinity and male relationships. But there are some like set pieces that I think are supposed to be sort of funny, and they're kind of losing me a bit. But as I was saying about the Irishness of it, my dad was too, and now he's down below with your brother, and it's just me and my ma, and she's terrible strict. Like the way that it's written sounds so Irish, and I know he is an Irish writer. Will you not come on, Lampo, for example. And I'm finding that quite charming for it to be written in a vernacular, even if that vernacular doesn't quite make sense, although there is some touches of Ireland. They've met someone from the Tin Isles, and his name looks very Irish to me, so it's interesting. I do want to see where it goes. It's a very simple, very basic plot, but I am liking the way that it's exploring these ideas of masculinity. Got myself a gin and tonic, and for reading for the end of today, and I'm hoping to finish these both fairly soon. It's a fairly quick read, this, and it's definitely the one I'm enjoying the most. Hello, I am absolutely exhausted, so I am standing up to try and give myself a bit more pep and energy while I tell you about my final thoughts of these two books. So, Rabbit Hole by Kate Brody wasn't as it was advertised, and having read some of the reviews on Netgalley, where I got the my advanced reader copy from, I have seen that a lot of people have said the same. It's advertised as being like a thriller and a page turner and kind of exciting, and involving true crime, and the way that like the internet obsession with true crime kind of perverts the understanding of crime and affects people who are the victims of crime or the families of the victims of crime. And it's not that at all. It's definitely much more like a depressed woman, literary fiction, unhinged women kind of narrative. It follows a woman who, because of the experiences that she's gone through, losing her sister who went missing and who became part of this true crime thing, and her father committing suicide after becoming obsessed with that, and his drug addiction, etc. It's her kind of slowly losing touch with reality and trying to grasp onto anything. Wasn't what I was looking for. This video is supposed to be my year of page turners, and it certainly was not a page turner. It was very slow moving, quite depressing. I found myself like struggling with my own like mental health during reading this sometimes. I found that it was really dark, and like I'm usually someone who's fine with a dark read, but I wanted a page turner, I wanted something fun, and this wasn't that, which is not the fault of the book, but it is the fault of the marketing. The thing that I would say is the fault of the book is that it is supposed to be this look into true crime, and I really didn't think it explored that idea very well. It didn't explore, like I mentioned at the beginning, all of those things that I thought it might explore, like the dangers of an obsession with true crime for people who are just lay people, and the like the racial makeup of people who are looked as victims in true crime. And the perpetuation of this white woman victimhood that is part of the problem with true crime, as well as the obsession with people who real life as if it was a story. I don't think it really went into that at all. It just used it slightly sensationalistically. It was kind of like a gimmick in order to grab people who are into true crime and bring them into this book, rather than, I think, very sensitively or well explored. And I thought that the reveals were kind of pointless. Like, they were set up like a thriller novel, but they weren't particularly revealing, so that they weren't that particularly interesting to read. Like, it was fine, and it was definitely well written, and I think if you go into it like knowing what you're getting out of it, knowing that it is an exploration of grief and very difficult and uncomfortable, full of unlikable characters, and that's what you go into it wanting, then I think you'll have a better time. But I do think that the true crime thing could have been handled a little better. Then I also finished Glorious Exploits, and that was my favourite book of this video, and I enjoyed it in spite of itself in some ways. I thought it had some really beautiful writing. I love the way that it used Hiberno English, which I've talked about before on this in this video, and I love the way that it was kind of very modern and very immediate for being set in ancient Syracuse. It had some very beautiful lines and some really wonderful like descriptions of place that I think were really beautiful and really like reflective of Homer in some elements. My kitten's causing chaos. What are you doing? She cannot be left unsupervised, can you? But it did occasionally go a little far with the writing. I think there was certain things about this that I have noticed with other debut novels, not all debut novels, but debut novels that have potential but aren't 100% successful, in that the pacing was a little off. The plot really ramped up towards the end, and then kind of petered out. It didn't quite feel balanced in terms of the pacing. The writing sometimes went a little far. It got a little overinvested in its own style, and so sometimes I think pushed a little too far, was slightly cheesy. Only our main character is particularly well developed, but it is a very short book, so I would say that that's kind of to be expected in terms of a short book, and I enjoyed reading it. It was a pleasurable experience. It was a page turner. I finished it very quickly, and I found myself like being really pulled into this story. And as someone who, I have a classics degree, but I have never enjoyed a Greek myth retelling that I have read since I started this channel. This is not a Greek myth retelling, but it is set in the ancient Greek world. I think what we've learnt in this video is that I don't really, not very good judge of what will be a page turner. I think Rabbit Hole I can forgive myself for misjudging, because it seems like a lot of people felt that it was mismarketed, so I'm not alone in that one. I think I just need to avoid fantasy unless I have good reviews of it from other people, because I'm not a fantasy reader, so why did I think that picking up The City of Stardust would work for me? I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep endeavouring to find some fun page-turning books, because whilst they aren't always my favourite books, I definitely want to read more of them. I hope you enjoyed this vlog. If you're new here, my name's Roisin. I put out new videos twice a week, so I will see you again very soon. Please remember to give this video a thumbs up and to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you again very soon. Thanks for watching. Bye!